The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with representatives from 40 different alien species. They had gathered for an emergency meeting. The air was thick with tension as Ambassador Kelthrix from the Zephyrian Empire walked to the center of the room. His three eyes looked at everyone present. He had something important to say. Kelthrix began speaking through his translator device. The machine changed his alien sounds into words that everyone could understand. He told them that the Kravik Dominion had declared war on Earth. The Kraviks wanted to conquer the human homeworld and enslave all humans. This news should have shocked everyone, but instead many aliens in the room seemed uninterested. Commander Thrace from the Vornathi species laughed out loud. He said the humans were weak and foolish. They had refused to join the Galactic Council's protection program. Now they would pay the price for their pride. Other aliens nodded in agreement. They all knew the Kraviks had 10,000 warships. The humans only had about 200 ships, and most of them were built for exploring space, not fighting wars. But Kelthrix raised his clawed hand to get everyone's attention. His voice became very serious. He told them they were all making a terrible mistake. He explained that he had lived on Earth for 3 years. He had walked among humans. He had studied their history and their culture. And he had learned something that terrified him. If the Kraviks attacked humanity, the Kraviks would not survive. The room exploded with laughter. Many aliens thought Kelthrix had lost his mind. How could a weak species like humans possibly defeat the mighty Kravik war machine? The Kraviks had conquered 17 different civilizations. They were unstoppable. Thrace spoke again, his voice full of mockery. He said humans were emotional and divided. They fought among themselves constantly. Their planet was split into hundreds of different nations. They had no unity. They would crumble at the first sign of real danger. Kelthrix's center eye focused directly on Thrace. He spoke slowly and clearly so everyone would understand. Yes, humans were emotional. Yes, they were divided. But Thrace did not understand what happened when humans faced extinction. When their backs were against the wall, humans transformed into something that should never be awakened. Their history was filled with stories of impossible victories and last stands. They never gave up. They never surrendered. And they never forgot those who wronged them. The ambassador pulled up holographic images of Earth's history. He showed battles where small groups of humans held mountain passes against massive armies. He showed wars where humans fought for years, even decades, refusing to accept defeat. He showed weapons that humans had created, devices so terrible that humans themselves had agreed never to use them, but those weapons still existed, waiting in storage facilities around their planet. Kelthrix explained that humans had a unique characteristic. They could hold grudges for generations. They would sacrifice everything for revenge. They had destroyed their own cities rather than let enemies capture them. They had fought wars that killed millions of their own people. And through it all, they kept fighting. The other aliens listened but still did not believe. They thought Kelthrix was exaggerating. Surely no species could be that determined, that ruthless, that insane. Far away on Earth, in the headquarters of the United Nations Space Command, Admiral Peter Hawkins read the message from the Kravik Dominion. The message was simple and brutal. Surrender within 48 hours or face complete destruction. The Kraviks would arrive with 3,000 warships. They would bombard Earth from orbit until every city was rubble. Hawkins was an old man who had served in space for 40 years. He had gray hair and deep wrinkles on his face, but his eyes were sharp and filled with determination. He called an emergency meeting of all human military commanders. Captain Jake Morrison was the first to arrive. He commanded the UNS Defiance, which was humanity's most powerful warship. Jake was 35 years old with short brown hair and a strong jaw. He had fought in several small conflicts on the frontier colonies, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Lieutenant Emma Walsh stood beside Jake on the bridge of the Defiance. She was 28 years old and in charge of the weapon systems. Her hands were steady on the control panel, but Jake could see the fear in her eyes. Everyone knew what was coming. The Kravik fleet was already on its way. Admiral Hawkins appeared on the main view screen. His face was grave but determined. He told all the commanders that humanity would not surrender. Earth had faced extinction events before in its long history. Asteroid impacts, ice ages, plagues, and world wars. Humanity had survived them all. They would survive this too. Hawkins gave his orders. Every ship in the human fleet was to arm itself with every weapon available. Civilian vessels were to be converted into military ships. Factories on Earth and the colony worlds would begin producing weapons around the clock. And most importantly, Humanity would show the Kraviks something they had never seen before. Jake asked what that was. Hawkins smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator about to strike. He said they would show the Kraviks what happens when you threaten humanity's home. They would show them that humans do not fight like other species. Humans fight to win no matter the cost. The orders went out across all human colonies and stations. Millions of people began preparing for war. Scientists who had been working on peaceful projects were redirected to weapons development. Engineers designed new ships. Soldiers trained for combat in space. And ordinary citizens volunteered to fight, even knowing that many would not survive. On one of the lunar bases, Director Karen Foster supervised the Weapons Research Division. She was a brilliant scientist who had spent her career developing new technologies, but now all her knowledge would be used for one purpose: creating weapons that could kill aliens efficiently. She unlocked files containing research that had been banned by human governments: antimatter bombs, biological weapons, artificial intelligence combat systems. Everything that humanity had promised never to use was now on the table. Back on the Defiance, Jake watched the crew prepare for battle. These were people he had served with for years. Some of them had families on Earth, children who would die if the Kraviks won, parents who were too old to evacuate. The weight of what they were fighting for pressed down on everyone. Emma turned to Jake and asked a simple question. What were their chances of winning? Jake was honest with her. Their chances were almost zero. The Kraviks had superior numbers and technology. But that did not matter. They would fight anyway because that was what humans did. They fought impossible battles. They defied overwhelming odds. And sometimes through skill or luck or sheer stubbornness they won. The Kravik fleet would arrive in 72 hours. Humanity had 3 days to prepare for the fight of their existence. 3 days to show the galaxy that humans were not prey. They were predators. And they were about to remind everyone why Earth's history was written in blood. Part 2. The Kravik fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. 3,000 warships moved in perfect formation. Each ship was massive, covered in thick armor and bristling with weapons. Supreme Commander Vrako stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conqueror. He was confident this battle would be over quickly. Brakos was a veteran of many conquests. He had destroyed dozens of civilizations. The humans would be no different. He looked at his tactical display and saw the entire human fleet positioned between his forces and Earth. All 200 human ships were gathered in one place. It was a foolish defensive strategy. They should have scattered and tried to protect their colonies. Instead, they had chosen to make their final stand here. The commander turned to his second officer and predicted the battle would last only a few hours. The humans would fight bravely, perhaps, but bravery meant nothing against superior firepower. His fleet would sweep through them like a storm through grass. Then they would bombard Earth until the humans begged for mercy. The Kravik fleet advanced slowly, maintaining their tight formation. This was standard military doctrine. Keep the ships close together so they could support each other with defensive fire. It had worked against every other species they had fought. But as they moved deeper into the solar system, something strange happened. The human ships did not hold their position. Instead, they suddenly broke apart into dozens of small groups. Each group consisted of only 5 to 10 ships. They scattered in all directions, moving at maximum speed. Some dove below the Kravik formation, others climbed above it. A few charged straight ahead into the center of the alien fleet. Vrako shouted at his officers, demanding to know what the humans were doing. This made no tactical sense. By dispersing their forces, the humans had made themselves weaker. They could not concentrate their firepower. They would be destroyed one group at a time, but that was not what happened. On the bridge of the UNS Defiance, Captain Jake Morrison gave the order to attack. His ship dove beneath a Kravik destroyer, moving so close that the two vessels almost touched. At that range, the destroyer's big guns could not track them. Emma Walsh, the weapons officer, fired every missile the Defiance carried directly into the destroyer's engine core. The explosion was massive. The Kravik destroyer broke in half, its reactor going critical. The blast wave knocked nearby Kravik ships off course and disabled their shields. Before they could recover, other human ships swooped in and finished them off with laser fire and railgun rounds. This scene repeated across the entire battlefield. Human ships used their smaller size and greater speed to get dangerously close to Kravik vessels. They fired at point-blank range, targeting weak spots in the armor. Engine cores, weapon ports, bridge sections. The humans had studied Kravik ship designs and knew exactly where to hit them. Commander Lisa Grant commanded a small corvette called the Swift Strike. Her ship was one of the smallest in the human fleet. It carried only 20 crew members and had light weapons. But Lisa was a brilliant pilot. She flew her ship through a field of debris from destroyed vessels, using the wreckage as cover. When a Kravik cruiser passed nearby, she launched all her torpedoes at once. The torpedoes struck the cruiser's ammunition storage. The resulting explosion tore the entire ship apart. But Lisa did not celebrate. She immediately turned her ship toward another target. There was no time to rest. No time to think about the danger. There was only the next target and the one after that. Frakos watched in growing horror as his fleet took heavy casualties. The humans were fighting like animals with no regard for their own safety. They used tactics that no civilized military would consider: ramming attacks, suicide runs, firing weapons at ranges so close that the explosions damaged both ships. One human destroyer, its weapons destroyed and engines failing, deliberately crashed into a Kravik carrier. The impact killed everyone on the human ship instantly, but it also breached the carrier's hull and caused a chain reaction that destroyed the much larger vessel. One small ship traded itself for a carrier that held 5,000 Kravik soldiers. The Supreme Commander ordered his fleet to pull back into a defensive formation. But the humans did not give them time to regroup. They pressed their attack relentlessly, following the retreating Kravik ships and continuing to fire. Every second, more Kravik vessels were destroyed or disabled. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Price led a squadron of fighter craft into the heart of the Kravik fleet. Fighters were small, one-person ships that were fast but fragile. They normally stayed on the edges of major battles, picking off damaged ships. But Nicole flew straight at the Kravik command vessels, her squadron following close behind. Kravik point defense systems opened fire, filling space with laser beams and flak rounds. Half of Nicole's squadron was destroyed in seconds, but the survivors kept going. They wove between the defensive fire, their pilots pulling maneuvers that would have killed anyone who did not have perfect reflexes and nerves of steel. Nicole herself targeted a Kravik command cruiser. She could see the bridge through the armored windows. Alien officers were moving around inside, coordinating the battle. She armed her entire payload of armor-piercing missiles and fired them all at once. The missiles struck the bridge section and penetrated deep into the ship before exploding. The command cruiser went dark, its systems failing. Without leadership, the Kravik ships around it began to make mistakes. They fired at each other by accident. They broke formation. The confusion spread through that section of the fleet like a disease. The battle raged for 16 hours straight. No one on either side rested. Human crews fought until their ships were destroyed or until they ran out of ammunition. Some ships, with no weapons left, rammed Kravik vessels at full speed. Others used their damaged hulls to shield other human ships from enemy fire. Admiral Hawkins coordinated the defense from Earth's command center. He watched the tactical display and moved units around like pieces on a chessboard. Every decision meant life or death for hundreds of people. Every order he gave sent someone's son or daughter or parent into deadly combat. But he never hesitated. This was war, and war demanded sacrifice. Finally, after hours of brutal combat, the Kravik fleet began to retreat. They had lost 900 ships. Nearly one-third of their invasion force was gone. The survivors were damaged and low on ammunition. Frakos ordered a full withdrawal back to Kravik space. They would regroup and return with reinforcements. The human fleet did not pursue. They could not. Of the 200 ships that had started the battle, only 60 remained operational. Many more were damaged beyond repair. The casualties were devastating. Thousands of humans had died defending their homeworld, but they had won. Against impossible odds, they had turned back the Kravik invasion. Earth was safe for now. Jake Morrison stood on the damaged bridge of the Defiance. Half his crew was dead. The ship's engines were barely functioning. Emergency repair teams were working to keep life support running. But they had survived. Emma Walsh sat at her station, tears running down her face. She was crying for the friends they had lost and for the victory they had somehow achieved. Admiral Hawkins broadcast a message to all surviving human forces. He thanked them for their courage and sacrifice. He told them this was just the beginning. The Kraviks would return with more ships and more soldiers. Humanity needed to prepare for a longer war. But Hawkins also made a promise. Humanity would not just defend anymore. They would take the fight to the enemy. They would show the Kraviks and the entire galaxy what happened when you attacked Earth. The age of human pacifism was over. The age of human vengeance had begun. Part 3. 3 months had passed since the first battle. The Kravik Dominion was learning a terrible truth about humans. They did not fight like other species. They did not follow the normal rules of war. They did not limit their attacks to military targets. Most importantly, they did not know when to quit. Captain Ryan Hughes commanded a new type of human vessel called the UNS Phantom. It was a stealth ship, small and painted black to blend with the darkness of space. The hull was covered in special materials that absorbed radar and sensor scans. When the engines were running in silent mode, the ship was nearly invisible. Ryan's crew consisted of 30 specialists. Engineers, weapons experts, hackers, and soldiers trained for covert operations. They had one mission: go deep into enemy territory and destroy Kravik supply lines. It was dangerous work. If they were caught, no one could rescue them. They would die alone in Kravik space far from home. Lieutenant Sophie Bennett sat at the sensor station. She was young, only 24 years old, but she was the best scanner operator in the fleet. Her job was to find Kravik bases and supply depots without being detected herself. It required patience and skill. One wrong move and they would be discovered. Sophie's sensors detected a target, a Kravik supply depot on a moon called Helion 7. The base was protected by a military garrison of 10,000 troops. Defense satellites orbited the moon. A fortress with heavy guns covered the landing pads. And most importantly, 40 Kravik warships were currently docked there, refueling and loading ammunition. In a normal military operation, attacking such a base would require an entire fleet. The defenses were too strong for a single ship, but Ryan and his crew were not planning a normal operation. They were planning something the Kraviks would never expect. The Phantom approached the moon slowly, its engines barely running. The ship drifted like a piece of space debris, carried by the moon's gravity. Kravik sensor arrays swept the area but detected nothing. The stealth technology was working perfectly. Ryan guided the ship through the defensive perimeter. They passed within a few hundred meters of automated weapons platforms. One active scan would reveal them. One lucky sensor ping would mean death, but they remained undetected, ghosts in the machine. When they reached the moon's shield generator, Sophie launched a small probe. The device was no bigger than a football. It attached itself to the shield generator's control panel and began hacking into the system. Kravik security software tried to block it, but human programmers had designed the probe to bypass alien defenses. 5 minutes later, the shield generator began to malfunction. Warning lights flashed in the Kravik control room. Technicians rushed to diagnose the problem. But before they could fix it, the generator overloaded. The massive energy field that protected the entire base collapsed in seconds. Ryan did not waste a moment. He ordered all weapons fired. The Phantom launched every missile it carried. 40 penetrator missiles streaked toward the exposed depot. They were designed to punch through armor and detonate inside their targets. Each missile had enough explosive power to destroy a small building. The missiles hit the fuel storage tanks first. Kravik ships used a highly volatile fuel that burned extremely hot. When the tanks exploded, they created a fireball that consumed everything nearby. Ships that were refueling caught fire. The flames spread from one vessel to another. Within seconds, 20 ships were burning. The remaining missiles hit the ammunition storage facility. Thousands of tons of Kravik ordnance detonated all at once. The explosion was so massive that it cracked the moon's surface. Lava began pouring out of the new fissures. The fortress collapsed into the molten rock. The garrison troops died instantly, vaporized by the heat. Ryan watched the destruction on his monitors. 40 enemy ships destroyed. A major supply base eliminated. Thousands of enemy soldiers killed. All accomplished by one small ship and a crew of 30 people. He ordered Sophie to plot a jump to their next target. There was no time to celebrate. The war continued. Across Kravik territory, similar raids were happening every day. Human stealth ships appeared without warning, destroyed important targets, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They attacked supply convoys. They destroyed fuel refineries. They sabotaged communication arrays. They even infiltrated Kravik military bases and planted bombs. The Kraviks tried to adapt. They increased patrols. They upgraded their sensors. They set traps hoping to catch human raiders. But the humans always seemed to be one step ahead. They changed their tactics constantly. They never attacked the same type of target twice in a row. They became unpredictable and therefore unstoppable. Commander Lisa Grant, who had survived the first battle, now led a team of saboteurs. Her group specialized in boarding enemy ships and taking them over from the inside. It was extremely dangerous work, but Lisa had a talent for it. She had successfully captured 5 Kravik vessels, stealing their technology and learning their secrets. On one mission, Lisa and her team infiltrated a Kravik research station. The station was developing new weapons to use against Earth. Lisa's team planted explosives throughout the facility and then broadcast all the research data back to human intelligence. When they left, they triggered the explosives. The station and all its scientists were destroyed. Years of weapons research were lost to the Kraviks but gained by humanity. Supreme Commander Vrakos was going insane trying to fight this new type of war. He was a traditional military commander. He understood fleet battles and ground invasions, but he had no defense against enemies who struck from the shadows. His supply lines were in chaos. His officers were afraid to leave their bunkers. Morale among Kravik troops was collapsing. Soldiers whispered that humans were demons who could appear anywhere, anytime. Vrakos's advisors urged him to negotiate peace. They argued that the Kraviks were bleeding resources and soldiers for nothing. The war was costing more than any potential conquest could provide. But Vrakos refused to surrender. His pride would not allow it. The Kravik Dominion had never been defeated. He would not be the first commander to accept defeat from a weaker species. Instead, he planned one final massive assault. He would gather every available ship and launch a direct attack on Earth. 2,000 warships would form the attack force. It would be the largest fleet the Kraviks had ever assembled. Surely the humans could not defeat such overwhelming numbers. Admiral Hawkins received intelligence about the Kravik plan from spies embedded in enemy territory. He smiled when he read the reports. The Kraviks were doing exactly what he had hoped they would do. They were committing all their forces to one massive battle, and humanity had prepared a surprise for them. Hawkins contacted Director Karen Foster at the Weapons Research Division. He asked if the solar defense grid was ready. Karen confirmed that it was. Every satellite was armed and synchronized. The orbital weapons platforms were fully charged. The trap was set. Hawkins gave orders to all human forces. Let the Kraviks come. Let them bring their entire fleet. Humanity would show them what happened when you backed humans into a corner. They would show the Kraviks the difference between fighting defensive battles and fighting for survival on your homeworld. Lieutenant Danny Cole worked in the command center, coordinating the defense preparations. He was a logistics officer, not a combat soldier, but he understood the plan and believed it would work. Every calculation checked out. Every weapon was in place. The Kraviks were walking into a killing field and they had no idea. On the Phantom, Ryan Hughes received new orders. All stealth ships were recalled to Earth. They would play a role in the coming battle. Ryan felt relief mixed with anxiety. Relief that he would see Earth again. Anxiety about what was coming. The next battle would decide everything. Either humanity would survive or they would be extinct. There was no middle ground. Sophie plotted a course back to human space. As the Phantom jumped away from Kravik territory, she looked at Ryan and asked a question. Did he think they would win? Ryan was honest. He said he did not know, but he knew humans would fight with everything they had. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes pure determination could overcome superior numbers and technology. History had proven that again and again. Now they would find out if history would repeat itself one more time. Part 4. The Kravik Armada emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 2,000 warships hung in space, arranged in a massive defensive sphere. Supreme Commander Vrakos had learned from his earlier defeats. This time his fleet would stay together. The humans would not be able to use their quick-strike tactics against such a tight formation. Vrakos stood on the bridge of a new flagship. His old ship, the Eternal Conqueror, had been destroyed in the first battle. This new vessel was called the Crimson Victory. It was larger and more heavily armed than any ship the Kraviks had ever built. Vrakos believed nothing could stop him now. The fleet began moving forward into the solar system. They passed Neptune's orbit without incident. No human ships appeared to challenge them. They continued past Uranus. Still no contact with the enemy. The silence was strange and unsettling. Where was the human fleet? Kravik sensor officers scanned continuously, looking for any sign of human vessels. They found nothing. Space appeared completely empty except for the normal planets and asteroids. Some officers suggested the humans had evacuated Earth. Perhaps they had run away rather than face certain defeat. But Vrakos knew better. He had fought humans before. They did not run. They were planning something. He ordered his fleet to proceed carefully and remain alert. Every ship maintained maximum shields and had all weapons ready to fire. The Kravik fleet crossed Saturn's orbit. Suddenly, space around them blazed with light. Thousands of hidden satellites activated all at once. They had been positioned throughout the solar system over the past 3 months. Each satellite was a weapons platform equipped with railguns, particle cannons, or missile launchers. The solar defense grid had been activated. It was the largest weapons system ever constructed by humanity. Every satellite was controlled by a central artificial intelligence that could coordinate their fire with perfect precision. The AI calculated firing solutions faster than any human could and never missed its targets. The satellites fired in perfect synchronization. Beams of energy and streams of metal projectiles tore through space. The Kravik defensive formation was strong, but it had been designed to defend against ships, not against weapons that surrounded them from every direction. Kravik shields flashed and overloaded as they absorbed the incoming fire. Ships on the outer edge of the formation were hit first. Their armor cracked under the concentrated bombardment. Hulls breached. Atmosphere vented into space. Within the first minute of the ambush, the Kraviks lost 50 ships. Vrakos screamed orders to his fleet. All ships were to activate point defense systems and begin targeting the satellites. But there were thousands of satellites and only 2,000 ships. For every satellite they destroyed, 10 more continued firing. The mathematics of the situation were brutal and simple. The Kraviks could not win a battle of attrition against fixed defensive positions. Then the human fleet appeared. Admiral Hawkins had hidden his ships behind Jupiter and Mars, using the planet's magnetic fields to mask their energy signatures. Now they emerged and charged at full speed toward the Kravik formation. But these were not the same ships that had fought in the first battle. Humanity had spent 3 months building a new fleet. The vessels were larger and more heavily armed than anything humans had constructed before. They incorporated technology stolen from captured Kravik ships. They carried weapons that human scientists had been developing in secret for decades. The flagship of the human fleet was the UNS Retribution. It was a dreadnought, the first of its kind. The ship was 1 kilometer long and bristled with weapons on every surface. Admiral Hawkins commanded from its bridge, surrounded by tactical displays and communication officers. Hawkins gave the order that every human had been waiting to hear. All ships weapons free. Show the Kraviks what humanity had built. Show them that humans learned from every battle and came back stronger. The human fleet opened fire. Plasma cannons, reverse-engineered from Kravik technology, melted through enemy armor like blowtorches through paper. Magnetic accelerator guns fired projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. When those projectiles hit Kravik shields, they punched straight through and devastated whatever was on the other side. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Price, who had survived the first battle, now commanded a squadron of the new human fighters. These were not the fragile craft from before. The new fighters had shields, heavy weapons, and advanced AI assistance systems. They moved through space like schools of hunting fish, coordinating their attacks with inhuman precision. Nicole led her squadron straight at a Kravik carrier. The carrier launched its own fighters to intercept, but the human craft were faster and more maneuverable. Nicole's wingmen took out the enemy fighters while she focused on the carrier itself. She armed a new weapon called a fusion penetrator and fired it at the carrier's hangar bay. The penetrator was a missile with a small fusion warhead. It was designed to punch through armor before detonating. When it exploded inside the carrier, the fusion reaction consumed the ship from within. The carrier broke apart in a flash of nuclear fire. Hundreds of Kravik crew members died in an instant. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the UNS Defiance, which had been repaired and upgraded after the first battle. His ship was now equipped with new engines that made it even faster than before. Emma Walsh still served as his weapons officer. Together they had trained for 3 months for this exact moment. Jake piloted the Defiance through the chaos of battle, targeting Kravik command ships. These vessels coordinated groups of other ships, and destroying them caused confusion in the enemy ranks. Emma fired the ship's main gun, a spinal-mounted particle beam that could cut a Kravik cruiser in half with a single shot. The battle was not one-sided. Kraviks fought back desperately. Their ships had superior shields and their weapons were still powerful. Many human vessels were destroyed in the first hour of combat. Captain Ryan Hughes's stealth ship, the Phantom, was hit by a lucky shot from a Kravik destroyer. The ship exploded, killing Ryan and his entire crew of specialists who had conducted so many successful raids. But for every human ship lost, the Kraviks lost 3 or 4. The solar defense grid continued firing without pause. Human ships pressed their attack with the same fearless determination they had shown in the first battle. Damaged vessels that could no longer fight effectively deliberately rammed Kravik ships, using their hulls as weapons. Commander Lisa Grant led a boarding party onto a damaged Kravik battleship. Her team fought through the corridors, killing alien soldiers with precise gunfire. They reached the ship's reactor core and planted explosives. The team barely escaped before the explosives detonated, causing the reactor to go critical. The battleship exploded, taking 2 nearby Kravik destroyers with it. Vrakos watched his fleet die around him. The battle had turned into a slaughter. His ships were trapped between the satellite weapons and the human fleet. Everywhere he looked, Kravik vessels were exploding or drifting dead in space. The mighty armada that was supposed to conquer Earth was being systematically destroyed. The Supreme Commander's officers begged him to order a retreat. They had already lost half the fleet. If they stayed, they would all die.
Finally, Vrakos accepted the truth.
The battle was lost. The war was lost. The humans had defeated them completely. He gave the order to retreat. All surviving Kravik ships were to jump to faster-than-light speed and escape the system. But the humans were not finished. Admiral Hawkins ordered his fleet to pursue. Hunt down every fleeing Kravik ship. Not one vessel was to leave the solar system alive. The human fleet chased the retreating Kraviks to the edge of the system. They destroyed ship after ship. By the time the sun rose on Earth the next morning, the Kravik invasion force had been completely annihilated. Only one small ship was allowed to escape. A command pod containing Supreme Commander Vrakos Hawkins had deliberately let Vrakos survive. The Kravik commander needed to return to his homeworld and deliver a message that would make it clear to every species in the galaxy what happened when you attacked humanity. Part 5 Supreme Commander Vrakos stood in chains before the Kravik High Council. His military uniform was torn and stained. His body bore the wounds of defeat, but the deepest wounds were to his pride and his spirit. He had commanded the greatest fleet the Kravik Dominion had ever assembled. Now that fleet was destroyed, and he was the only survivor. The council chamber was silent as Vrakos delivered his report. He told them everything: the ambush by the satellite weapons, the upgraded human fleet, the relentless pursuit that had left no escape. 2,000 Kravik warships had entered Earth's solar system. Only his small command pod had been allowed to leave. One council member asked the question everyone was thinking. Why had the humans let him survive? Vrakos explained that it was intentional. The humans wanted him to carry a message back to the Kravik homeworld. They wanted the entire Dominion to hear what happened to those who attacked Earth. Vrakos activated a holographic recording. The image of Admiral Peter Hawkins appeared in the center of the council chamber. The human admiral's face was hard and cold. His eyes showed no mercy, no compassion, only iron determination. Hawkins began speaking. He identified himself as the commander of the United Nations Space Command. He told the Kraviks that they had made a terrible mistake. They had come to Earth expecting to find a weak species that would surrender. Instead, they had awakened something that should have been left alone. The Admiral's words were measured and calm, but they carried the weight of absolute certainty. He explained that humans did not surrender. They did not forget. They did not forgive. The Kravik fleet was destroyed. The soldiers were dead. And now, humanity was coming for the Kravik homeworld. The holographic recording shifted to show the human fleet, but it was not the damaged defensive force from the first battle. Hundreds of new warships hung in formation around Earth. More were visible under construction in massive orbital shipyards that surrounded the planet like rings. The industrial capacity of humanity was fully focused on one goal: building a war machine capable of destroying the Kravik Dominion. Hawkins continued with his ultimatum. The Kraviks had 6 months. 6 months to withdraw from every world they had conquered. 6 months to dismantle their military forces. 6 months to prove they understood the cost of threatening humanity. If they did not comply, the human fleet would arrive at the Kravik homeworld. And they would bring total war. The recording made it clear what total war meant. Humans would not just defeat the Kravik military. They would destroy the Kravik civilization. They would hunt Kravik ships across the entire galaxy. They would not stop until the Dominion was nothing but ash and memory. This was not a negotiation. It was a promise. The holographic recording ended. The council chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, one of the council members spoke. He asked Vrakos a simple question. Could the Kravik Dominion defeat the humans in a prolonged war? Vrakos shook his head slowly. He had seen human determination firsthand. He had watched them sacrifice ships and crews without hesitation. He had witnessed their ability to adapt and improve their technology in mere months. Most importantly, he had seen something in human eyes that terrified him. They enjoyed war, not in a sadistic way, but in the way a master craftsman enjoys practicing his skill. Humans had been fighting wars for their entire history. They were very, very good at it. He told the council that fighting humans was different from fighting any other species. Most civilizations fought wars to achieve specific goals. They wanted territory, resources, or political power. When those goals became too expensive to achieve, they negotiated peace. But humans fought wars for psychological reasons, for revenge, for honor, for abstract concepts like freedom and justice. You could not negotiate with ideas. You could not make humans accept defeat by destroying their ships. You had to break their spirit, and Vrakos did not believe that was possible. Another council member asked about the human industrial capacity. Surely the humans could not maintain such rapid ship construction for long. Vrakos pulled up intelligence reports his scouts had gathered before the final battle. Earth had converted its entire economy to war production. Civilian factories now built weapons. Scientists who had studied peaceful technologies now developed new ways to kill. Even children were being trained for future military service. More concerning was the human population. Earth held 8 billion people. Even if the Kraviks killed millions, there would always be more humans. The Kravik homeworld had only 2 billion inhabitants. In a war of attrition, simple mathematics favored the humans. The council debated for hours. Some members argued for continued resistance. They insisted that the Kravik Dominion could not show weakness. If they surrendered to humans, other conquered species might rebel. The entire empire could collapse, but most council members understood the reality. They could not win this war. The humans had demonstrated superior tactics, remarkable adaptability, and most importantly, an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Every battle would cost more Kravik lives and resources. Eventually, the humans would reach the Kravik homeworld. And when they did, they would show no mercy. The council voted. By a narrow majority, they chose survival over pride. The Kravik Dominion would accept the human terms. They would withdraw from conquered worlds. They would reduce their military forces. They would pay reparations to the species they had subjugated. And they would never threaten humanity again. Far away in the Galactic Council chamber, Ambassador Kelthrix received news of the Kravik surrender. He felt no satisfaction in being proven right. Too many beings, both human and Kravik, had died in this war. But perhaps their deaths had taught an important lesson to the galaxy. Commander Thrace of the Vornathi Collective approached Kelthrix. The same commander who had mocked the humans months earlier now looked at Earth with a mixture of respect and fear. He admitted that he had underestimated the humans. He asked Kelthrix to explain what made humans so dangerous. Kelthrix pulled up records of human history. He showed wars that had lasted decades, conflicts where humans had fought in frozen trenches, burning deserts and dense jungles, battles where small groups of humans had held positions against overwhelming numbers, last stands where humans had chosen death over surrender. The ambassador explained that most species develop civilization by learning to cooperate and suppress their violent instincts. Humans were different. They had learned to channel their violence, to control it and direct it at external threats. This made them peaceful neighbors during times of peace, but it also meant that their capacity for violence was still there, waiting to be unleashed. Kelthrix showed the council members human cultural works, books and films where the heroes were warriors who never gave up, songs that glorified sacrifice in battle, monuments built to honor soldiers who had died defending their homes. Human culture celebrated war in a way that most species found disturbing. But there was another aspect to human nature that made them truly dangerous. Humans formed emotional bonds with each other that transcended logic. They would die for strangers from their own species. They would sacrifice everything to protect their families. This emotional capacity made them vulnerable in some ways, but it also gave them strength. A strength that came from knowing someone had your back, that you were part of something larger than yourself. One council member asked if the galaxy should fear humanity. Kelthrix thought carefully before answering. He said that humans were not naturally aggressive. They had lived peacefully with other species for 70 years. They traded fairly. They shared technology. They asked only to be left alone. But the Kravix had made the mistake of threatening Earth. They had attacked human families and human homes. And in doing so, they had learned the most important rule about dealing with humanity. Never attack them unless you are prepared to face a species that will burn down the galaxy before accepting defeat. Never threaten their homes unless you are willing to fight not just soldiers, but an entire civilization transformed into a weapon. On Earth, in a military cemetery overlooking the ocean, Captain Jake Morrison stood among rows of grave markers. Each marker bore the name of someone who had died defending humanity. Friends he had served with, colleagues he had trained with, brave men and women who had given their lives so others could live. Lieutenant Emma Walsh stood beside Jake. Her arm was in a sling from injuries sustained in the final battle. She had been badly wounded when a Kravik missile struck the Defiance's bridge. But she had survived, and the Defiance had survived, and Earth had survived. Emma asked Jake if all the death and sacrifice had been worth it. Jake looked at the grave markers for a long time before answering. He said they had not started the war. They had tried to live peacefully. But when forced to fight, they had shown the galaxy that humanity could not be conquered. Perhaps now other species would think twice before threatening human worlds. Perhaps the deaths of those who fell would prevent future wars above them. Human warships patrolled the space around Earth. New defensive satellites replaced those that had been destroyed in battle. In orbital shipyards, construction continued on new vessels. Humanity would never again be caught unprepared. They had learned that peace was precious, but it could only be maintained through strength. The war was over, but humanity had changed.